I never set out to be a traitor. Of course, I never really set out to be a lot of things, like a flannel graph or that stupid little song. How sad is it that what most of you remember about my life is my height? But as bad as that song is, I would personally lead 1,000,000 renditions of it if I never had to hear another sermon about my life. I know you've heard them. I hope you haven't preached them, but they usually end with some kind of aphorism, something like, Zacchaeus overcame his unique problem to meet Jesus. And any definition of theological rigor aside, these sermons, in reducing my life to a series of sickly, sweet aphorisms, they fail to miss the point entirely. Because my problem wasn't my height. And believe me, it was not a unique problem. See, I was a traitor to my people and to my nation, to the ones who gave me birth and gave me identity. But that's putting the cart before the horse, and I don't want to do that today. What I want to do today is embrace the rich complexities of my story so that today you can really understand the miracle that happened in Jericho all those years ago. When I was born, I was, like most sons, my father's pride and joy. He gave me a powerful name, one that means righteous. And like most fathers, he pinned his hopes on me. See, we didn't grow up in a good neighborhood in Jericho, and it was clear to me from very early on that it was my job to bring the family up out of that place. Though we were poor, I grew up like most of my peers. I went to synagogue on Shabbat. I went to Jerusalem on the high holy days. We made sacrifices. We were generous when we could be. We kept Torah. Eventually, I was apprenticed to a potter in the city, and I learned the trade. And although I have to confess I didn't really like it very much, it was work. And every time I sold a bowl or a cup in the city market, I beamed with pride. Eventually, we obtained enough income to allow me to marry. And soon my wife was pregnant. And that's when the wheels fell off. See, my wife, when she became pregnant, grew ill. And day after day, she wasted away in front of my eyes. That body that I had loved became frail, and the swelling belly was nowhere near as large as it should have been. And I went to everyone. I went to the temple. I made sacrifices. I prayed to Yahweh, and the Levites couldn't tell me why he wouldn't answer my prayers. I went to magicians and midwives and rabbis and wandering sages, priests and Levites and Gentile priestesses and doctors, and no one could tell me why. Every morning that I woke up with her next to me was a miracle, and every night was a vigil spent in abject terror. I explored every possible option. I was turned away from more doctors' offices than I can count and thrown out of more doctors' offices than I care to remember. I couldn't afford the kind of health care that would heal her. I knew it was out there. I knew it existed, but I couldn't access it. I didn't live in the right neighborhood. I didn't have enough silver in my purse. My money dwindled daily as I searched for a cure, but I couldn't find it. And so I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed for a miracle. And one morning it came, although not in the way that I expected it. I was coming out of yet another doctor's office, and I blinked in the bright Jericho sun, and I ran smack into a man, and we both fell down in the dust. And before I could even think, he was up and running away again. I called for him, but he was already gone. In the dust, though, he'd left a purse. I reached for the soft leather bag, and I was shocked to find in that bag more money than I would make in an entire year. There it was. There was my answer right there in front of me, but before I could even stand to my feet, a shadow fell across my face. There was no mistaking those heavy hobnailed sandals, or the crimson red of the tunic, or the steely sheen of the breastplate, or the hard face, or the crested helm. There was a Roman centurion standing right in front of me, and he had his hand stretched out, asking without any words for that bag. I threw it to him, dejected, afraid that once again my miracle would be taken from me. But to my amazement, he counted out about a third of the bag, put it in his own pouch, and tossed it back to me. "Keep it," he growled. "Services rendered to the empire." I didn't know what to do. This was more money than I'd seen in my entire life, but he was clearly nonplussed with my indecision. "There's more if you want it," he said. "Go to the Legion Fort. They're looking for more publicani. They're looking for people so I don't have to chase these tax dodgers." Publicani. God in heaven, that word stung like a slap across my face. These were Roman tax collectors, agents of an oppressive empire who had license to collect as much money from my people as they wanted, as long as Rome got its share. These were oppressors and functionaries of the imperial regime. They had betrayed my people to work for Rome. But they lived like kings. And they had access to the doctors that I needed. And though in that moment I swore to God that I would never become one, I wanted to be one. For just a moment, I wanted to be one. The money was good. It was enough to cover my debts and nurse my wife back to health, but it ran out after a few months, like all money does. I was at the end of my rope again. She was still ill. No matter what I did, I couldn't work hard enough or long enough. I couldn't make the right pots. I couldn't do the right things. I swore that I wouldn't be a tax collector, but I learned that my fidelity came at a high price. Finally, at the end of my rope and nearing the end of my wife's very life, I went to the fort. I presented myself to the city officials. The centurion vouched for me, and they gave me the last contract. In desperation, and only in desperation, I swore I sold my life for the sake of my wife's. I took the contract, and I became a Publicani. The word still stung. And I started out nobly enough because I had been on the other side of the table. I took only what I needed. I worked with my clients. We set deadlines. We reduced percentages. I took only the money that I need to support my wife and the child that was coming. But when I took that first month's takings to the city officials, they laughed at the homespun clothing that I wore. And so when I went out to collect next month, I took a little bit more, only a little bit, just enough to buy a toga. Because I was afraid that if I went back there and they laughed at me again, they would take away my contract. And if I had no contract, there was no money, no doctor, and no hope. Quickly, however, the empire began to control my imagination. I found I could justify almost anything in the name of keeping my contract. Things that I had used to think were silly and elaborate luxuries quickly became my needs. I was buying fish plates and importing the best wine and doing everything that it was expected of me to do. The balsam trade that flourished in Jericho, that healing balm, only made me richer. And soon my skill became clear to the city officials. When I would present new takings, they would hint to me that a promotion was in order if only I could prove to them that I was a good Roman. If I could throw a dinner party for the heads of the corporation, everything would be okay. And of course I did it. The things that I took now became the tools of my social advancement. I bought the right foods, I said the right things, I used the right fork. Everything was perfect. I became so good at denigrating my own people and praising the Roman elite that soon I was the chief tax collector for the entire city, and I got so incredibly rich. In those days, I didn't have a conscience. But when I was panged with brief moments of guilt, I justified it. I could see no way out of the system. I had slaves and servants who depended on me for food. If I stopped taking taxes, they would go hungry. My family depended upon me. My father still clung to the old notion that wealth meant divine favor, and if the money dried up, then God wouldn't love us anymore. I couldn't get out. I was trapped in the middle of a complex economic system that I had no real understanding of. I became bitter. When everyone around you sees you only as a taker, it's hard not to fulfill that prophecy. When the only things that you hear are negative things, it's hard to be positive. I didn't just function as a tax collector, I became a tax collector. Taking was enmeshed in my very being because that's what everybody thought that I was good at. I became a new Zacchaeus, one who was concerned only with the next payment, who was adept at maneuvering in Roman social circles. I became what I hated, Publicani. Oh, but I remember when things began to change. I was wandering in a Jericho back alley one day, and I heard someone talking about this man named Yeshua. He was a Galilean of some sort, a rabbi or a mystic or a sage or a peasant. I had no idea, but this man believed that he was Messiah. And when I heard that word whispered in a Jericho back alley, for a moment, hope was reignited in my life. I remembered that there was another way of doing things, that the empire did not have a contract on my life, that there was another way of living that didn't involve subjugation and taxation, but involved love and grace. And so when he came to Jericho, I was there. And before this, I would have thought that my stature and the fear that I engendered in people would have gotten me to the front of any line in Jericho, but not today. The words that this strange Galilean had to say to the people were so enthralling that I couldn't get within 1,000 yards of him. But he had ignited that imagination in me, and I needed to see him, to touch him, to know that there was another way forward. And so I did the most undignified thing I could possibly think of. In a toga and everything, I clambered up a sycamore tree and I lodged myself in a branch and I saw him. And I swear to you, he was looking right at me. Not even looking in my direction, staring directly into my eyes. And you know how I knew it? Because the next moment he was saying my name, Zacchaeus. He wasn't scolding. He was saying, Zacchaeus, what are you doing in that tree? We're having dinner tonight. Didn't you remember? Should I come up in the tree with you, or will we have a table? It was a joke, but it wasn't an insult. It wasn't mean-spirited. It was the quality of a friend who invites himself to dinner over and over again simply because he enjoys your company. There was no derision in that voice either. No hate for a traitor, even though it was common knowledge that he traveled with zealots. Needless to say, I scurried down that tree as quick as I can and rushed home to make dinner. My servants and my slaves prepared the best meal possible. I set out my fish plates. I had goblets of Falernian wine. All the forks and spoons were in the right place. There were 4 different napkins. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. Delicacies would not stop coming to us until we passed out. But when Yeshua arrived, none of that mattered. He liked the wine well enough, but he didn't comment on the heady bouquet that I made sure was present on the nose. He only used 1 fork, and I'm pretty sure he used the wrong sauce with the wrong fish. Not that he was rude, far, far from it, but he lacked the pretense that I had grown so accustomed to. He didn't correct my own lapses in etiquette as I had come to expect, but he talked to me. He looked me in the eyes and he knew my story and he learned who I was and what I was about. He made it absolutely clear that he was not here at this table for political advancement. He wanted to know who I was. Zacchaeus, he finally said, pushing his chair back from the table and leaning into a sigh of contentment. Zacchaeus, you have such a gift for hospitality. Look at all of the wonderful things that you have given to me and to my friends. You have done such a good thing today. Lord, I began, waving away yet another cup of wine. Don't say this. Don't treat me this way. You know who I am. You know how I make my money. You know why I give these feasts. How can this possibly be a good thing? I don't deny the truth of your word, Zacchaeus, but you shouldn't deny the truth of mine. I have seen your face delight in the comfort of a guest. I have seen your deep joy in taking care of people. Think of how you got here in the first place. All of your motivations have been skewed, but that one remains, to take care of your wife and child. He didn't even let me answer. Zacchaeus, he said, the next time you give a feast, I want you to invite the people in this city who are poor. These are people who can't repay you. They have no vested interest in your political success. In fact, I think they might have the opposite interest. They cannot and do not want to play the game that you have played for so long. But they do need friends, and you need friends. And like friends, for a moment, you might begin to take care of each other. This table here, though it is finely wrought, is not different from any other table in the world. This is not a political tool, Zacchaeus. This is a place of love and equity. You knew that once. Stop fueling the injustices of the empire and instead give your coin where it is needed. You have wealth. Use it in the service of God's kingdom, not Caesar's. In that moment, something changed. For the first time in a long time, I was able to see myself as something other than what other people said about me. I was able to see myself not as a taker or a traitor, but as someone who had a gift, someone who had something to contribute to the world instead of taking away from it. I was a friend, and Yeshua treated me as a friend. He saw the fundamental goodness that had been twisted by economic realities until it was a part of a system that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. He saw the desperation, and he spoke new words into my life. He had seen what I was really good at. Instead of assuming what other people thought I was good at, he pointed my life towards that deep joy. And he asked no payment for this gift. Yeshua, I cried, you have seen me. I cannot believe that I have allowed my gifts to be abused and that I have only been giving to myself. This cannot be. Right now, I will sell half of what I own and give it to the poor people of Jericho. And from the remainder, I will pay back everyone that I have stolen from. No, I will pay it back fourfold because that is what the law demands for equals. I will give to everyone as my equal. In those moments around that table, he didn't reduce me to an aphorism or an axiom. He came to my city and he learned the complexities of my story. He walked among us. He learned about us. He saw what I was good at. He encouraged my strengths and he corrected my course. But he did it all as a friend. And because of that friendship, at the end of the night, he was able to say to me that salvation has come to this household. For this traitor is a son of Abraham. And the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Please, for the love of God, remember that story the next time you get the urge to sing a rousing chorus about a wee little man.